7 o'clock. Have a great rest of today. Northwest Public Radio, KRFA 91.7 Moscow Pullman, KNWV 90.5 Clarkston Lewiston, and KNWO 90.1 Cottonwood Grangeville.
Good evening. This is the Wednesday, October 26, 2016 meeting of the Moscow Planning and Zoning Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with approval of the minutes of September 28th. Are there any additions, corrections, deletions to the minutes?
I make a motion we approve.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. Minutes carry approved. All right. So moving on, is there any correspondence from staff?
Maybe just one tidbit. I went to the Idaho chapter of the American Planning Association conference, and so that's why we had skipped the last meeting. It was down in Boise, and we had gone around the Greenbelt and did a bike tour and went by the university, and they had a couple student housing projects that they had just finished within the last couple years, and they were talking about they had also been awarded a parking reduction. And so, you know, in that area, it was kind of close to downtown and the university, so they were still unsure of whether or not, you know, there were going to be any issues associated with that, and so they're kind of in the same boat as us as far as, you know, new developments with student housing, with parking reduction, like the Identity project that we had reviewed. So just thought I'd report that.
Interesting. So are they constructed yet, or did you say they're under construction?
Yeah, they are constructed within the last couple of years, and then there's another, actually the same developer is building a project up here as at Boise, and I think he's just going through all the process right now, or he just got done with that. And so I think they're scheduled to be constructing about the same time as the project up here. So it'll be interesting that, you know, they had accomplished their off-street parking by doing podium parking. So they had the first floor was just parking, and then you have it goes up from there. I think it's 4 stories. But it was really, they have probably some design requirements where they screen the parking. And so there was like this mesh metal screen right on the, you know, it wasn't very, you know, the feel from the street wasn't that great, because you had just this, you know, instead of maybe like a blanks, you know, some storefronts, some retail space that you could put in there. It was just like a metal painted mesh screen that you could kind of see the cars on the other side, but not really. And the feel, you know, walking down the sidewalk, we were during the day, and I could imagine at night that it would feel even, you know, worse. So
that's too bad, because Boise has that precedent of Neil Hosford's building where there's a retail wrap on the sidewalk, and that masks a parking garage on the first 2 floors. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so they have a really good precedent that's been successful. But,
yeah.
Any other correspondence? Okay. Well, we would have, now is the time for the Transportation Commission meeting report, but Joel Hamilton, who's our representative for that commission, isn't here. I don't know, Mike, if you have anything you could fill in for that, or do you know anything about it, or Catherine?
They met yesterday, didn't they? Because Jim was telling me last night.
And Joel was probably out of town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It wasn't yesterday. Well, then he was going to be at another transportation meeting, sorry.
It's usually on Thursday is when they meet, so.
Right.
I think the last one was probably canceled, so we'll have to wait for Joel to give us an update.
Okay. Okay, we have reached the point in the agenda called open microphone, and it's an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the commission regarding matters not on the agenda nor currently pending before Planning and Zoning. Please, is there any? Are you here to speak during this period? And no, neither one of you. Okay. Well, anybody who might be listening in the general public on TV, if you have things you want to talk to us about, this is an opportunity to do that in the future. Okay. So now we open a public. Well, no, we don't open the hearing, but we are moving to the public hearing concerning the amendment to Title IV, Chapter 5 regarding nonconformities, and Mike's going to begin with presenting.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. This is a project that we've been working on for the last couple months, and it's regarding the nonconformity section of the zoning code and some issues that we've had pretty much since around 2008 period. We had gone through the nonconforming use section, and we don't really have that many nonconforming uses within the city. I think the only comment that was received last time was a statement to be added at the end about, we usually have a statement about the nonconforming use or structure or nonconforming use and structures. If they ever cease for a certain period of time, they can't be reestablished, and so the nonconforming use portion has a similar statement like that, and it states that if it ceases for a period that's greater than 30 days, then it has to conform to the current regulations of the zoning code. We had another sentence in another section of the nonconformities that discussed the provision that if there was a discontinuance or abandonment that was caused by government action impeding access to the premises, then that would not kick in the 30-day rule. And so based upon that comment last time, I had included that at the portion of the nonconforming use section here to include the government action. Nonconforming structures, we had made quite a few changes here, gone through, and right now we have a lot of restrictions on nonconforming structures as far as enlarging or altering those. We had gone through and decided that we're going to allow it via conditional use permit, and so at the end of subsection 1 here, inserted that recitation that points you in the direction of subsection 4, which goes through the conditional use permit process. And then we have the insertion of whether or not they're, if they're destroyed, and then the inclusion of by no fault of the owner, and then give examples: fire, flood, natural disaster. They may be reconstructed having the same zoning nonconformities, but no more than it existed before the damage occurred. So we had reworked that portion. Didn't change the moving or altering portion at all. And then this would be the section that we had inserted the conditional use permit allowance. So it could be that the nonconforming structure is enlarged or altered with those same zoning nonconformities through a CUP, so it would be going to the Board of Adjustment in order for them to review that. And the Commission didn't want to put any type of limitation, percentage limitation on it, and wanted the board to, it'd be up to the board to decide that. Then the repairs and maintenance section. This is something that we had changed the end, deleted the provide that the volume of the structure existed when it became nonconforming shall not be increased. We had removed that portion because it was covered in other sections, so it was a little redundant. Since the last time, I don't think we had talked about this before, so this is new. In the first part, what I had done was gone in and made a change for your consideration. It originally said that ordinary repairs and repair or replacement of non-bearing walls, fixtures, wiring, or plumbing may be done on any non-conforming structure or non-conforming portion of the structure. So, the issue we have with this one is there's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done on non-conforming structures, and a lot of that involves bearing walls. So, you're always faced with this section that discusses repair or replacement and, gives a specific requirement of non-bearing walls, fixtures, wiring, and so we thought we'd just simplify that to include ordinary repairs and maintenance may be done on any non-conforming structure or non-conforming portion of the structure. Just to keep it simple and not prohibit the non-bearing walls issue. I mean, if you have a portion of a foundation that's going out, that would mean that maybe you couldn't replace that. If you have a portion of a exterior wall that may be rotting or have some damage to it, it would say that maybe you couldn't replace that. And so it's just been problematic for us over the years. And so we had caught that at the very end, and that's why you're just seeing it right now. So. And then we move on to the nonconforming uses and structures in combination, and this is the main section that we have issues with as far as maybe a duplex in a single-family zone, not being able to rebuild that. And the first subsection here, we discuss the nonconforming structure and use. If it's not permitted in the zoning code in which it's located, it can't be enlarged, extended, constructed, reconstructed, moved, or structurally altered, except in changing to a use that would be allowable within the underlying zoning district. We added the statement at the end that except when the destruction of an existing structure and use in combination occurs by no fault of the owner, structure and use in combination may be replaced to its original size and use prior to the destruction. So allowing it to be replaced, but limiting the size to the original size of the structure upon destruction. We didn't change anything about the rest of the sections of nonconforming uses and structures. Just simple statements about it's allowed to be replaced with a permitted use. We have the same blanket statement about discontinuance or abandonment for a certain period of time. If that happens, has to be replaced with or converted to a structure that's allowed underneath the zone. And then you have the statement about the cause of government action impeding the access to the structure and exempting that out. And then we had this statement at the end that discusses what the destruction was, and since we're allowing, gives a percentage, 70% of the replacement cost, and since we're allowing the replacement, should it be destroyed, we don't need this statement anymore, and so we ended up going ahead and deleting that. So that's the total of the changes to the nonconformity section. And staff's recommendation is to conduct a public hearing and consider public testimony and then forward the recommendation of approval onto the council. And I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
From commissioners, are there any questions?
I don't have any.
Covered this one pretty well. Okay, thank you, Mike. I guess at this point I'd like to invite forward anybody who might want to speak in favor of this ordinance change. Would you please state your name, address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes?
Gabriel Telling. Address is 923 Harold Street. We live in a house that is affected by this. We're trying to purchase it and have been trying to purchase it for almost 6 months now. First bank fell through because of this situation. We're working on the second bank right now. So it would be helpful for us if it was changed, as Mike has noted. So
good. It's great to put a real person and case with this what we perceive to be a problem. So thank you for coming forward. Are you here to speak? No? Okay. So there's nobody else opposed or wanting to speak of a general nature, so I guess that I will close the public hearing now. And we'll have an internal discussion and vote.
It's nice to have it cleaned up.
Yeah, I think he's done exactly what we were looking at. I think it's ready to roll.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I've always known this was a problem, and I'm glad to see it getting fixed myself. So,
absolutely.
All right. So, do I want to hear a motion?
I move that we approve the draft ordinance and forward it to City Council.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Motion carries. So we'll direct staff to move it forward, and there's no relevant criteria with this one because it's an ordinance, is my understanding. So I think we're all right on that one.
I believe that was a record-setting public hearing.
Yeah, we might have a record-setting meeting. Okay. And we have Deb is going to go get well for us. So thank you, Deb, for showing up for the hearing so we can move forward.
Thanks for taking one.
Yeah, go get well.
Feel better.
Yeah, feel better.
Okay, the use table update. So we'd covered this last time. We met about a month ago, and I sent you with the use table, our current working version of that, and I promised that we would give you a version that just shows where we started from. And so attached to your packet tonight is what I've done. I have have the current working version as well, but we've also attached where we, pretty much where we started from. And so what we originally had done with all the uses across all the zones was to put all of them into a table. And so that's what, a depiction of what we had done here. Put all the uses and then put them in table form. And then we had some recommendations, and so Becky, our previous planner, had gone through and when we discussed all these, wrote down where we were going with certain uses and more of a NIAX classification. And so going down the list, we were able to look a lot of those up, and if it had a NIAX number to it, we put the NIAX number over there. Put comments regarding whether or not we could eliminate some uses, whether or not they were covered in other areas. And so it's hard to see, but like for instance, number 1, accessory buildings incidental to farm and forestry uses. Well, accessory buildings are just inherent that they're allowed as part of the majority of uses, and so we could eliminate that from a principal use category. It's typically under accessory uses. So you can see that what we've done. Going down the list here, certain things, there's certain sections where called out like barbed wire fences and a farm ranch because you have livestock in that zone, or you could have them. And so, a lot of that's covered in other areas, so we move those to the fence section. And so, just going down the list, that's what we've done. And, as we had gone through and reviewed it, the changes that we had made as far as looking at uses and trying to determine whether or not those should be allowed in other zones. Example is, perfect example of that would maybe be cemeteries. So special use permit, so we had gotten rid of the special use permit, and we're just going strictly conditional use permit. So, that would be one of the questions that we came up with was, well, it's allowed in all residential zones except suburban residential. That doesn't make sense. It should be allowed across the board. There's really no reason that we could come up with that why cemeteries wouldn't be allowed in a suburban residential zone if they're allowed in an R1, R2, R3, R4 zone. So those are a lot of the things that, just seeing some inconsistencies across the zones as far as allowed uses. We've gone through and tried to clean a lot of those up where they made sense and think about those a little bit. And so, these are all the residential uses, all the uses that are named underneath the residential zones. And so we've gone through that. And then that would bring us to the use table where we included all the different zones, and then cleaned it up and formatted it to the way we intend to put it in the zoning code. This would be the commercial inventory of named uses, and so same thing, gone through all the different zones, inventoried all the uses, and then listed them in a matrix format, and then had the recommendations. A lot of these, using the NIAX terminology, there's going to be a slight change in the use terminology. So, like churches, the NIAX terminology, I think we had churches. We had like maybe 3 or 4 different examples: churches, mosque, things like that. And under the NIAX terminology, it'd be religious organizations, and it would include all of those. And so, that's what we had been doing is going through and identifying the NIAX terms. Comparing those to our uses, consolidating some of those where we saw that uses were pretty similar, but they had a little bit of difference in there. And I won't bore you with going through line by line, but this is really where we had come from to get to where we are with the use table that we currently have. So after we did that, this is for example, this is the use table that we came up with. So we have all those uses. We've got those whittled down to just the uses that we have and the correct NIAX terminology. List all the NIAX numbers so you can look those up, and we'll have the definitions that correspond to those numbers at the end of the zoning code for easy reference. And then we've just gone across to all residential as well as commercial zoning districts and listed whether it's a permitted use, conditional use, permitted accessory use. And so, we've been through this time and time again to try to vet out, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and I think I'd rely on the commission members to go through and just kind of compare where we came from and what we ended up with, and see if anything jumps out at you as far as, well, I think that maybe bed and breakfast should be allowed by right in this zone, or they should be a conditional use in this zone, and thinking about, I think with the table that I printed, I spelled out all the different zones on the top of the residential one, so you should have all those there. And just go through, and if anything jumps out at you, we'll keep a tally, and then we can bring that up and talk about it maybe next time we go through the use table. But so, another aspect of this is, for example, this is the R4 zone. So we've taken all those uses as the permitted principal uses, accessory uses, conditional uses. We've eliminated special and moved those to conditional. So this is all, going to be in the table format. What we're left with is lot requirements. So I think I'd shown you the table before that has all those consolidated into one table. So we don't need that anymore. That, as well as yard requirements. So this is setbacks. What we had done, we have these sections called limitations on uses. So there's kind of special requirements depending upon the zone. These are pretty common across the residential zones. So they try to take into consideration uses other than dwellings. So you could have maybe a church or a school, things like that within the R4 zone that have special requirements, so they don't impact other, maybe the neighborhood that's surrounding that property that may be the same zone. So they have restrictions like no more than 35% of the lot area should be covered by buildings. Off-street parking can't be located in the required front or street yards, and that's typically because you have, maybe a large parking lot that's associated with a lot of these institutional uses that you may see. So that's why we have these special requirements. And then, last one, like a type 8 buffer has to be provided along property lines of those zones. And it's just to, try to allow these uses that aren't really dwellings to fit in better with the area. And so what we've done is moved all these limitations to uses in a table as well. So, there won't be a whole lot of information. We'll go through, probably still just keep the intent of each zones. And that'll take maybe 2-3 pages to go through all the zones and keep the intent of each one. And then we'll move the limitations on use section, since a lot of these zones have the same ones. So for instance, R1 through R4 all have those same, 35% of the lot area, the off-street parking, and the type 8 buffer. That's all common across most of those zones. And then, you have a lot of these other uses. Use restrictions is really what they are. Motor business has quite a few, which really require uses to be conducted wholly and entirely within enclosed buildings, and then they exempt out about 20 uses. And so that, partly that's the reason why this is so large, is because of motor business, is because you just got a ton of uses that you exempt out from not being required to be in enclosed buildings. So that's what we've done with limitations on uses. And so, just trying to move towards getting away from the narrative form into more of a matrix on all of these, sections within the underlying uses, or within the underlying zoning districts. So, and then these are the bulk and dimensional requirements that we had gone through before. I don't think these have changed at all. So we hadn't, we had a few years ago we had updated some of the setback requirements and tweaked those a little bit. And I don't think that we're proposing anything new here with the setbacks and the minimum yard area and the minimum lot width. They're all pretty much as they exist today, and we're just putting them in table format. So, and then we have all these sub-bullets here at the end, which, we've got the footnotes here, and then we state what that is there so that it doesn't get too long, having, these definitions maybe just too lengthy. And so it ended up, we'd gone back and forth, and that's what we ended up on, and most other jurisdictions do it a similar way and have the bullets at the bottom. So, that's pretty much it. I think I'm going to rely on you guys to go through and really look at it pretty closely, compare back and forth, and see if everything makes sense. And we've gone over it for the last year and gone back and forth and gone through it. And so I think we're at a point where we feel pretty comfortable that it's where we want to go, and just would like your thoughts and comments on it.
Well, I think in general it's much more user-friendly from an architect's standpoint. When I've worked in other jurisdictions, they've had use tables instead of the narrative, and it's just quicker. You
Yeah.
can get the information out a lot faster.
And they're easier to, it's easier to hand out to the public, too. I mean, you can come in and have those 4 sheets and hand those out, and you don't have to, look up the specific zone and print off a copy of the certain
Waltz
page and go back and forth. And things are hidden in certain areas, and it's nice just to get them into one location so everybody understands what the rules are, and they're out there in the open. So, unless anybody has any questions. Yeah, Kirk.
Back in the country and western song, how come everybody got a paper copy of it except me?
It didn't come in the mail?
Oh, I didn't see it in my packet. Yeah, that one.
You can borrow mine.
You can have mine.
Sorry.
It was so sad.
You would have them all read by now, right?
Yeah.
So are you thinking, when would this reappear on?
Well,
agenda?
next meeting we have Les
McDonald,
coming to
yeah.
give the multimodal transportation plan. I was envisioning that'd probably take up the majority of the time for Q&A and his presentation. So that would give you a month. Well, it'd give you more than that, because the next meeting would be December. First meeting in December.
Right, because Thanksgiving
since
is.
the other one falls around
day,
Thanksgiving week.
right.
So it's up to you. If you think that we can always add it on the agenda, and then if we don't have enough time, we can
Table it.
push it on to the first meeting in December. But it'd be nice to try to get, have everybody get through it and give us any comments. But like I said, it's pretty refined on our standpoint, but we look at it every day, so it'd be nice to get a perspective from the commission on some of these uses. So we could approach it that way if that would work.
Okay, yeah, we can see if everybody's ready to move forward with it. I can send out an email or something to have people look at it in preparation for the next meeting. But I'm also thinking that after reading the first 3 chapters of the transportation report, that it might be useful to read a few more chapters and to really.
Chapter 5. That's the
Yeah. Because the first 2 were just kind of fuzzy, and
Okay.
warm and fuzzy, and then it gets a little more specific in the third, and I'm hoping there's more specifics coming. So I was planning to read more, and I guess I would encourage people, if we really want a productive discussion, to
Okay.
focus on that one. What do you all think?
I agree. The first, it didn't really get into the meat and potatoes of it until later on, and especially toward the end when there's more of a
There were a lot of
plan. Yeah.
pages intentionally left blank.
Yeah.
So if it looks like 70 pages, you're really reading about.
Well, what I wanted
40
to say
pages.
too is we've had a lot of people coming to the council talking about 3rd Street. So besides Chapter 4, which kind of gives some a lot of numbers to what's happening, but Chapter 5 is complete streets. So it is the plan for how to take care of things. So that one is very helpful, and I've been directing people to read that, because I think that once you see that and once they hear Les talk, I think there's a lot of good information that shows that there's been hard thinking, collective thinking about how Moscow can move forward. It addresses, everything that people want.
Well, in addition to complete streets, one of the issues that seems to surface constantly, whether it's a new subdivision being approved or people from 3rd Street. Nobody wants through traffic through their neighborhood, even though, and so what part of the report deals with eastern traffic, or traffic from eastern development getting around downtown and the city?
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4, okay.
But you have to remember, the comprehensive plan, you have to kind of tie them together, because
Right.
the comprehensive plan was one idea. Right?
Yeah.
They're two different documents in basically the same time.
Uh-huh.
So you have to take them together, and they're plans, so they're not
Right.
written in stone. So
Right,
it's
right.
the general idea of where things could go. But the numbers are based on what could happen, what is happening. And I think sometimes people take the numbers as, and projecting it into, therefore, this is going to happen. And I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Right.
And because the comprehensive plan was also looking at 2030.
Mm-hmm. So you're recommending reading through Chapter 5?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll send a note out, I guess, to everybody to see if they could entertain that in their schedule. And then what else would be on the agenda for the next meeting, if not the use table? And
It would just be discussion of shared readings, which ties into Les's presentation.
right. So
it'd be we could have the meeting strictly for the multimodal transportation plan, and it's important to think about the comp plan too, because this multimodal transportation plan was more of the technical document
Right.
that was going to inform the comp plan, the transportation section on the comp plan. And so what we were looking at was updating. It's been about a little less than 10 years. It's been 2009 since we adopted the comp plan. So we're supposed to review it every 10 years and update it. And so we're going to be coming up on that here in the next couple years. And we wanted to, think about doing an update to that. And this would, the multimodal transportation plan would play into updating the transportation section of the comp plan, which, for instance, like the Ring Road, alternate highway bypass is all the way around the city, and the comp plan within the multimodal transportation plan, they have mixed feelings on it, and they said that, well, based upon the projected traffic volumes out there, that it wouldn't be worth building in certain quadrants, just because there's not going to be enough traffic that are going to be using it to warrant building something that large around the city. And so, those are things that we'll have to grapple with and updating it.
So what what would you recommend that we look at in the comprehensive plan if people have time?
Well, primarily we just have the thoroughfare plan. So we have the section on just transportation, and
I think quite
it's
a
pretty
few
short.
people were serving on the. Kurt, you were probably on the commission when you developed it, and Dennis and I weren't, and Greg wasn't. So it's about half and half. Nels I know was, and Joel, and Deb. So
Okay.
I think.
Well,
Deb
we
was
can
on,
put
yeah.
we can put certainly that section on there as well.
Yeah.
A link to the transportation section of the comp plan.
That would be helpful.
And as a city council member, I appreciate you knowing it too, because that's the questions that are coming, and so it's trying to meld together the philosophy with the technical and help people understand that there's thinking about it, and it's.
Right. I mean, I'm familiar with aspects of the comprehensive plan as they've related to various things that we've covered, but I haven't read it cover to cover, so. And I don't think I will between now and next month either, but it would be nice to be pointed in the right direction. So, any other items for discussion? Or, well, we have a kind of record. I guess we can adjourn, unless I missed something. Yeah.
That covers it.
I guess you could explain to me how we look at this again, what we're supposed to be doing exactly, and do we go somewhere else? Is that part of what we look at, or what exactly? I just need a synopsis of what we're doing.
Well, yeah, you don't necessarily need to review. You can look at the setbacks and the lot size and lot width, those requirements, but those are all pretty much the same as what we have right now, and we could certainly review those to see if we want to make any changes there. What I really need you to take a look at are the two use tables. So you'll see I've got the new one that you can see, it's at the very beginning of the attached stuff, right after the ordinance. So there's one that's in blue for the residential uses, and then there's one that's in like a magenta maybe for a pink for non-residential uses. So we've got that, and that's really the current updated version that we're proposing to put in the zoning code. What I've got attached to the back, the larger 11 by 17, is where we came from to get to the updated table. So, just looking through, a lot. What I think the commission was looking at last time was not knowing what changes had been made or what uses were tweaked a little bit, and that's why I'd included these ones at the 11 by 17 ones, is where just to kind of carry you through the process of what we had done. And so these are all the uses that we have now, and then you can kind of track what our recommendations were over here on the right side, and then you could pretty much go side by side. So the first one is going to be residential, so you can pull up the table for residential on, and just put them side by side, and you can see what the changes are and just kind of go down the list. Probably take you, an hour or two just to put them side by side and just use by use go through and look at the different terminology maybe, and look at maybe some changes we've made to where it's allowed under, underneath what different zones. And then just, think about it and
That helps.
yeah, and just, if you got an idea about whether, questions about why something, one use is allowed here and why it isn't allowed here, things like that, just to think about, where uses are allowed and where they're not.
Gotcha.
So the one question that came up when I was looking through this is fraternity, sorority, and cooperative houses, and they're only permitted in R4 with a conditional use. So, am I, from reading that, would I assume that they're really only allowed where they exist now, next to the University of Idaho campus or something? Or if somebody wanted to locate one in along 6th Street or something, is that it would have to be in an R4 zone? It would actually be something that could be considered as a conditional use.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's two spots where they're allowed within the university zone. They're permitted by right, so they don't need to go through a conditional use permit. So if you look all the way to the right, the U is university.
Okay.
So,
I was wondering where that would show up.
So
Okay, gotcha.
They're allowed by right at the university. They're right now they're only allowed within R4, and that's mainly just because the majority of the property that surrounds the university that's actually privately owned, like Elm Street,
Is R4.
Is R4. So, I don't think that we'd want to introduce fraternities and sororities.
I wouldn't either.
Single family.
Might get some
But
pushback.
I figured there had to be a place
Yeah.
that they were allowed without a conditional use, and I didn't notice the use.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's just, we want to review maybe the impacts in an R4, whereas if they're on campus, then
Right, it's
right.
Right.
A
Gotcha.
use that fits in with the rest of the uses. So
okay.
And I just want to tell you, on the website, the comprehensive plan is Chapter 3 is the mobility chapter.
Chapter 3.
Community mobility, Chapter 3, so you can just go straight there.
Mike, can you send out the rest of this that's got the footnotes and all that on it?
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
yeah.
Oh,
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah, because I can't even see them from here. The numbers are cut
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
And there's some
Yeah, I
references
will,
here that aren't included in the packet.
I'll send that out.
Thanks.
Any other
I think I got it.
discussion? Should we adjourn? All right. I forget, do I have to call for a motion for adjournment?
No,
No,
just say
okay.
adjourned.
I had a,
We just all wander off.
yeah, okay. I can just say done.